One of the, I think, lesser known uses for Sapphire in Media Composer is using Sapphire to enhance your just standard Avid title media. And you can use Sapphire to really bring just the basic title media, the old-fashioned title media to life to create things like this. Animated titles that look very nice and that you can do right there in your timeline. But there are a few things, there are a few gotchas to working with Sapphire on title media in Media Composer. If you're working in Adobe Premiere, this is not an issue for you because you can just take the filters and you can drag them on top of your title clips and stack them to your heart's content, and they will apply directly to the titles, and you won't have to worry about how they combine with the video footage underneath. In Avid, however, there are a couple steps that you have to be aware of. Okay, so here's a fresh sequence with no effects applied to it. As you can see down here in my timeline, I have just a regular Avid title media clip that says "Welcome to Santa Anita Park." No movement on it at all. And let's just get started with adding some effects to it. Now, one of the things that I'll start with is putting a simple drop shadow on there, which is one of the things you can do with Sapphire under the lighting category here. Just grab drop shadow. You can add a drop shadow in the title tool, but let's just say you forgot to do it, or let's just say you just decided not to do it because you wanted to do it in Sapphire. If you wait and don't do it in the title tool, you have a lot more control if you do it with the Sapphire plugins. So grab drop shadow and let's put it on top of your title tool, or I'm sorry, your title clip. And you notice what happens, the background goes white and the text goes black. What we need to do is switch over to our effect mode. You need to make sure that you have apply to title key checked if you want to be putting any of your effects onto title clips. Okay, so now we've got apply to title key, and let's start adjusting our drop shadow to look the way that we want. So let's just change the Shift XY here to bring it in a little bit closer to the text, like so, and maybe I'll blur it just a hair less. Okay, I like the way that looks. Great. Okay, now let's say I want to give the text a little bit of movement. So what I had done before was I went under the distort category and I went to warp drops. And let's just see what happens whenever I just drag warp drops on top of this. I'm going to hold down my Option key as I drag it over. If you're on a PC, this is the Alt key. Hold down Option or Alt as you drag the filter over on top of your title clip. And now what you can see happens is it's actually affecting all of the footage. It's not affecting only the title. In order to stack clips or stack effects on title media in Media Composer, you need to go over to your effect editor, and there's one thing that you need to remember. Over here in your effect editor, I'll just minimize this disclosure triangle so you can see that I have two effects here that are stacked on top of one another. What we need to do is you need to go to your bottommost effects, all of your effects from the bottom up, and make sure that on your input tracks right here, you have the background changed to none. So all of the clips, except the very top one, are going to have background changed to none. It defaults to one track below, but you want to make sure it's set to none. Now you notice I switched this to none, and all of a sudden my image goes away. My image goes away, but that's okay. I'm going to close the disclosure triangle on drop shadow, open it up on warp drops, and now I'm going to change this background, since this is the uppermost title in the stack. I'm going to change this one to one track below. Okay, now I've got my picture back, and you can see that the distortion is only happening to the text underneath. All right, great. Now we can go in and we can actually start to animate it a little bit. So for this warp, let's just bump up our phase speed a little bit here. And let's see how that affects it. These are real-time effects, so this is going to play back without a problem. Liking that. Okay, and then maybe I'll just take my amplitude down a little bit. And let's keyframe the amplitude so that it sort of comes together. And let's see how that looks. I like it. All right, and I'll just change my keyframe interpolation to spline. Nice, very nice. Okay, so that looks good. Now, let's say we want to add a little bit of light to this. I'm going to go under the Sapphire lighting category and grab an S raise and Alt drag that on top. And now remember, every time you add a filter on top of your title media, you're going to have to change this background over here on input tracks to one track below. The uppermost needs to be changed to one track below, and then all the ones underneath need to be changed to none. So let's change that to none, and notice that as soon as I do this, now the rays are only affecting the title media. Okay, so now let's go back to our rays and let's keyframe those rays a little bit. Let's make them a little bit brighter, and let's make them a little longer, and let's make them a little bit more colorful, like yellow. Okay, cool. And now let's do a little keyframe action here. Let's keyframe the length and the brightness. Add a keyframe there. And one there. And let's say they don't go fully away. Get small. Let's keyframe our brightness from where it's at down to right here. All right, and then let's add a little bit of atmosphere just to give the image a little bit more life, I think. Oh, wait a second. Our brightness got too dark, maybe. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna change my warp drops amplitude and bring that down a hair. There we go. Okay. Now back to rays, and let's move up our shimmer. Let's make these really shimmer, and let's give it a lot of atmosphere. And let's see how that looks. Like it. Okay. And we'll just have it slowly keyframe the length of the rays down just ever so slightly. Same with our brightness. Okay, I like the way that looks. Awesome. Now let's say you're working with it and you're like, okay, I wish that I had created that title media to be a different color. So instead of going back to the title tool to recreate your title media in a different color, what I would suggest is going over here and grabbing Tint from Sapphire Adjust and adding that in here, and use Tint to change the color of it. So let's drag it over. Alt drag on top. Now Tint is on top, but you might want to tint it before we actually add the drop shadow. That way we're not tinting our drop shadow as well. So I'm going to go over here in my effect editor, and I'm just going to drag the tint down to the bottom. Now you can see that the title is all messed up, so we really have to be aware of our background setting for our input tracks. So let's go back and start from the beginning. You'll remember that our first step was to apply title key. So let's go to drop shadow where we turn that on. Let's turn apply title key off. And we already have the input track background set to none, so let's leave that the way it is. And then go to Tint, turn apply title key on, and then make sure that our background is set to none here as well. And then just double checking while we're at it, background set to none on warp drops, and on rays it's set to one track below. So just remember the uppermost filter needs to have its background input track set to 1 track below. Okay, so now let's see how this looks. All right, everything still looks nice. Everything's still playing back well. Let's go back to our tint and let's change the color. Maybe we make it, our text a little bit yellow as well to sort of match the rays. I'm liking that. So looking good. All right. And then finally, what I did was, as the text came off screen, I had it rack defocus, so it sort of dissolved off screen as it sort of went out of focus. So let's go to a Sapphire blur and sharpen category, and then grab the rack defocus, and just alt drag that on top, and change your background to 1 track below. Let's turn off the input track on rays to none, so that we're only defocusing the text. And then let's keyframe rack defocus so that as the text dissolves off screen, it's going out of focus. So I'm going to go over here and keyframe my defocus width. I'm going to add a keyframe there, and then add a keyframe on the last frame. And let's just really bump it up on the last frame so it's really out of focus, and then make sure that on the first frame of the keyframe it's perfectly in focus. So then it's going to go like that. Perfect. All right, now I'm going to go back into my source record edit mode and find that first frame of the defocus. Just put a tail fade on that like so, and now it dissolves off screen as it's going out of focus. And I think while I'm at it, I'm also going to put a head fade on the front of that clip so that it fades in nicely. And let's give it a quick render. And there you go.